In Europe, we learn skill set.
Okay.
Through apprenticeship, through hotel schools, through, working experiences. In America, you learn marketing.
Okay.
Extremely well, and sales. And in Asia, you learn hospitality.
Tell me, what got you into the world of hospitality and the hotel industry in the first place? What was your kind of early years like, formative years like in Germany growing up?
Indeed. Hi, Michael. First of all, thank you for having me here. Hospitality came to me quite naturally. I was lucky enough, I guess, to travel a lot when I was young. And I've always was fascinated by hotels and how they make people happy and put a smile on people's face. And I always kind of knew from very early that I either become a pilot or get into the hospitality industry. And I tried the pilot route, which didn't work out because Lufthansa was quite strict on their medical requirements and said, I have too many red blood cells. And if there would be an emergency dive, I could lose consciousness. But they also said, but you can go to any other airline.
For a pilot.
But now comes better. They said, you can go to any other airline in the world, but we have the test.
Okay.
So that didn't work out. And then I said, okay, it must be hospitality.
Okay.
And I was in New York, started in New York. And then through a friend of mine who was working at Mandarin Oriental, I ended up in Hawaii. Or I had already a contract signed in New York to work there. But then if somebody offers you Hawaii,
you don't say no, do you?
You don't say no.
And
so I kind of slipped into it.
Well, Hawaii, the best place to start. What was that like as a first experience? You're there as a management trainee?
I was there as a trainee.
So kind of just earning your stripes.
Yes, which was very, very interesting because it was very, very different than from growing up in Germany, the way people were. And I think Hawaii added a special spin to it because no matter how difficult your day was or challenging, whenever you looked outside, kind of everything was blown away. And I really, really enjoyed living and working in Hawaii. And those were long days, like often in traineeship.
Sure.
With very, very few days off. But whenever you got out, my God, I remember I would always drive around Oahu and there was a special spot where you could see Maui. And no matter how exhausted or maybe sometimes unhappy I was, I was sitting in my car smiling to myself how lucky I am to be here.
Oh, amazing. I think your physical environment makes a huge difference, right? To your mental state of mind. For me, I always love living near the ocean. So Hawaii, having the mountains behind you, the ocean right in front, makes a massive difference. As you said, even if you had a terrible day, you can always find a reason to smile. Yeah,
it was simply just driving to work or driving home, correct?
Yes.
Along the ocean, or we had dolphins in the Mandarin over there.
Wow.
Just by walking by. And I was, in charge of the dishwashing department at the time. So not the most glamorous
far removed from the dolphins.
Hospitality arena. But again, was I think the whole package really gave it to me.
Well, we all have to start somewhere. You're in the dishwashing department. Indeed. You're obviously general manager of the Singapore Mandarin Oriental now. What did you learn? What good habits did you pick up? What did you learn in terms of maybe mindset as opposed to habits or skills when you're on that management trainee program and obviously rotating around different departments, presumably in the hotel?
Actually, I was very happy to start there as a dishwasher, chief dishwasher, as it was called. CDO. It was funny because I guess 99% of my departments, they could have been all my dad's. Yeah. So they were double and more the age I was. And here I came from Germany thinking I knew the world and knew what to do. And I have to say this was probably the most valuable time because the hospitality industry, or I think many industries in business, at the end of the day, it's really about people and leadership.
Yes.
And these 20 guys, they let me crash terribly, but they also picked me up again. And they really allowed me to learn from my own mistakes. And I'm still in contact with two of them today. And I often think back about these days and I really think, that was probably the best leadership class I could have gotten back in those early days with these guys. Because I guess if you're a dishwasher, politics, basic, none of this exists. It's pretty raw. correct? And it's pretty straightforward. And many of these guys had 2 or 3 other jobs. They were really working extremely hard to make a living.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as I said, I learned from them tremendously, and they allowed me to learn, which I was very, very grateful for. And of course, only realized much later.
Well, you're still in touch with them, which is a good sign, right? And I think the key part there is they allowed you to learn, because I think so often we hold on to the ropes too tight. We don't allow people to fail for themselves, to make mistakes and learn that way, right? I think a lot of the time, maybe I'm speaking about myself here, revealing too much, but I think we kind of mollycoddle people too much, and we don't give them permission to make the mistakes themselves. We want to protect them.
Fully agreed. And I think more importantly, we often, once you make mistakes, you get very quickly judged by it, correct? Or you don't get a second chance. And these guys, they really gave me a second chance. And there were unions involved, and there were many, many terrible moments when I think back. It was hard learning, right? It wasn't an easy one. But as you said, they allowed me to learn. And not only them, the whole, I guess, management structure, Mandarin Oriental at large allowed me to learn. And I'm a very, very firm believer in learning, and actually lifelong learning. I think you never get that 100% right. And
No.
there's nothing wrong with that, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Is that something you've really tried to instill in your team now? Clearly, you're managing a huge team. If we kind of delve into principles of management and leadership, what are the key things you're trying to focus on with managing teams, with motivating teams, keeping engagement high? It's incredibly difficult.
It's what you said. I think, first of all, they back then, these stewards allowed me to fail in leadership. But they also taught me a few other very important lessons, which I still apply today. One was that my title, that I was their chief, meant nothing. Okay. Right? I really was like, I remember a day where I think they walked out or didn't show up or whatever. And here I was by myself trying to manage that, and learned very quickly, that won't work. So they kind of, if I think back, gave me the opportunity to learn titles means nothing, and respect really needs to be earned. And you can really only function as a team, as we know. And I still try to imply that a lot. That's one of my guiding principles, is really personally that no matter what somebody's title is, be that a dishwasher today or somebody who, cleans the floor or a CEO, I'll try to teach everyone and handle everyone in the very, very, very same way. And I'm trying to teach that to my kids too, correct? Even when we are out and we see certain people, to always be respectful and kind. And I think that's something we have sometimes lost nowadays. And that's for me one of the important ones. The other one is to allow people to make mistakes. And I think that sometimes in our very fast times, very difficult, correct? Because we're sometimes under tremendous pressure to deliver
and everything
results.
Should have been done yesterday.
And everything should have been done yesterday. And it's frustrating too, correct? Sometimes you just want to do it yourself.
Of course,
You get frustrated by the same mistake, and I'm very good in that too. But again, I often go back to Hawaii and to Kahala to remind myself that I started somewhere, and that I was allowed to make mistakes. So I try to let these things very, very often guide me until today, and whenever I kind of forget, I'll remind myself very clearly of that.
Well, it's great that you remember. I think we're constantly in a state of remembering and forgetting and remembering. It's good that you've kept that value and that lesson kind of as a reminder to oneself. Let's kind of fast forward a little bit from Hawaii. Obviously, you're in this stunning place. You get moved to Southeast Asia. Was this by choice, by design? Were you forced to move here?
None.
Because you've lived in KL. So Mandarin Oriental brought you, none of the above, from Hawaii, stunning, to KL, I believe, Chiang Mai, Taipei, Washington, Boston, Singapore. Is that the route?
Twice Singapore.
Okay.
In Singapore before. But back to that. It was funny. One day, the general manager of that hotel came down to me one day and said, "You're moving to Kuala Lumpur." And I said, I moved to Kuala what? I didn't even know how to spell Kuala Lumpur. Neither did I know where it was. And I said, I'm clearly not moving away from Hawaii. But luckily, I wasn't very convincing. And I think a week later, I was on a plane moving to actually first going to Kuala Lumpur for an interview. And then coming back and moving very, very quickly. And again, one of those moments I think we all have in life. It, again, wasn't by design. It wasn't planned. None of the above. But I was very, very, very that it happened because, unknown to me at the time, it would really set a path to Asia, where I then remained for 13 years until I returned to the US, but came back now.
Yeah. And Asia is very much home now. You're obviously clearly very very fond
I think
of it.
Especially for hospitality, and maybe also, I don't know, for me as a personality or whatever, I like Asia a lot. I like the values a lot. And I think it goes back again to these days in stewarding that I think in Asia, respect for each other, community, teamwork, correct? Accepting different religious colors, whatever you want to name it, is, I personally find is much stronger still present than in the West. I've spent the last 7 years in the US now, and there were many traits I often missed on Asia.
Yeah. I mean, without kind of wading into any kind of geopolitical waters, we don't want to go there, but just in terms of standards of service, in terms of cultural values, in terms of the art of hospitality, what are some of the key things you think and key differences between East and West? You spent a lot of time working in the US in 5-star hotels, same in Southeast Asia. What's maybe one thing they do really well in the West that they perhaps don't do so well here in Singapore, and vice versa? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I often quote this. I think in Europe, we learn skill set.
Okay.
Through apprenticeship, through hotel schools, through, working experiences. In America, you learn marketing extremely well, and sales. And in Asia, you learn hospitality or the art of hospitality. I think one of my greatest learning was, for example, in Thailand, many, many years later, once again, I think the staff taught me more than I taught the staff, to be honest. And especially about the art of hospitality. And I think that you find very, very often in Asia still, the graciousness of service and just the pleasure of sheer serving. In Germany, it's funny, I'm from Germany original. You can put somebody under a car to do an oil change, and that's okay. Ask a German to serve a cappuccino, and they rather jump off a roof, I think. So there's, I think, something about in the West that sometimes I think we have a lot of issues serving somebody. Whereby, again, the art of hospitality in Asia, Southeast Asia in particular, I think is still, very, very ingrained, correct? I think you have pockets in Europe too, probably in Austria to some degree, maybe in Switzerland, where tourism is probably a big part of people's, up living. You feel this, but I think then in many parts, including the US, service is not really regarded as a profession or
something
as something
to aspire to,
correct?
I feel that very strongly as well. We almost, maybe it's kind of the individualist cultures in the West versus the more collectivist cultures in Asia. There's almost this antipathy towards deference, right? We don't want to be subservient in the West to someone, i.e. being in a service level job. I've waited tables, I've worked in F&B. I haven't washed dishes, but I was waiting tables, serving drinks, working for tips, and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I didn't have a problem with the fact that in the power there was a power asymmetry between me and customer. It was fine. And I think in the East, they get that. They can release the ego a little bit more and they don't mind being of service to someone. And I feel like it's a bit more of a struggle, as you said, in Germany. And I think it's funny, it applies to all businesses again, correct? Yes. I mean, in some it's can you put your ego aside, but it's can you put your ego aside? And no matter what it is, serve somebody, correct? That could be a product, that could be a physical food and beverage item, that could be a service, but it's this mindset of service. And I learned a lot in Southeast Asia from that, I have to say. Yes. And then, of course, was the sheer volume, correct? I think which relates to this often in Europe. Hotels are smaller. You have maybe one food and beverage outlet, whereby then, I remember when I arrived in KL, 640 rooms, 10 food and beverage outlets, right? Those were big numbers. I remember my first wedding, which was 2,000 or 3,000 people, and somebody said to me, "Have you done that before?" And I just said, "Sure." But deep inside me, I was scared to how what was going on. So, but again, each step has been learnings, and I think that's wonderful, and that's what I enjoy the most, and that's what I try to give back actually the most. Yeah. Brilliant. Presumably there's been so many of those moments in your career where you've been asked if you've done something before and you just have to kind of smile and nod and say yes and then figure out a way to deliver, right?
Yeah, I think one should be always honest, but sometimes you have to, just not as well, correct, and learn and deliver. I think that's calculated risk taking. There have been many moments like that. Yeah, I think like in any business, sometimes you just have to correct. I think often getting the chance and then executing it is often better than lifelong learning for it, correct? I think in many ways you can never be fully ready to do certain things, correct?
No. At some point we all just have to kind of jump and hope we make it.
And again, that will allow you to make mistakes, correct? To then learn from them. So I'm a very, very firm believer that often you have to stretch people a little bit and probably give them a little bit more responsibilities than they were really trained for or can imagine or whatever. But they very quickly, you can see, then can deliver or cope with that.
Yeah. Presumably over the course of your 20 years with the Mandarin Oriental, you've had chances to move somewhere else, to join a different brand, to join a different company, different organization. What's kept you at the Mandarin Oriental?
Always a very interesting subject, right?
And forget that anyone from Mandarin Oriental is watching.
Listening. I think it's very often, I often have headhunters who say,
take that hat
off. Now finally move you, please, right? And do something else. And it's funny, Mandarin is really my only employer, except out of the apprenticeship. But to answer your question, I think what has kept me with Mandarin Oriental for many, many years is I think something what is driven by the mother company of Mandarin Oriental, as in Jardines, correct? Yes. And that is often when we have the chairman or the board, which I get to meet, or I can tell you a very funny story in a little while, very, very early in my career to a very, very frightening moment. But I think the values, what triggers down from a Jardines into Mandarin and many other entities. And that goes back to respect and being very humble. And no matter where you are in the organization, correct, there is always time for a chat, for advice, for looking after somebody. Those are always value and what I experience until today, which often show me that that's something I probably cannot find somewhere else or haven't found or seen somewhere else. COVID was one of these other good examples when our industry was hit very, very hard with layoffs and stuff like that. And yet, our major shareholder, as in Jardines, kept the lights on, correct? And try to save as many employees in the organization as they could very kindly.
Well, they could have been a lot more ruthless and shed people, but they didn't. And I think in hard times, people reveal their true colors, right? When you're under pressure, that reveals someone's true character.
And it started for me very early. Actually, it was funny in Kuala Lumpur. I had just arrived, big hotel, and we had the chairman of Jardines at the time in the hotel. And the butler called me the night before and said, tomorrow morning, we are not serving, food as we normally do. It's a plated breakfast. Okay. And I didn't know any better, so I listened to the butler and did it. Breakfast was over and I was called into the suite, and I got in tremendous trouble with the chairman at the time, who was furious why we had changed the sequence of service. The King of Malaysia was there, the British Prime Minister, and all kind of very important people. And he was very curious where I came from, and I said, from Hawaii. But I think that's where it started. Moments, later, I was literally devastating. I think I went back to my room and thought, oh my God, what's happening? Then I went to the GM and told him what happened and kind of got the next knock on my head, what the heck I would be doing. And then later during lunch, when the chairman came down, big red carpet, big entourage, and I was kind of very far on the ballroom side, he all of a sudden steps out of this entourage, and I was like, oh my God, now I'm getting another one. And he came over to me and he said, I'd like to apologize for my behavior this morning. And I was speechless, but I think that summarizes kind of the values, what happened. And he said to me, please make sure you learn out of this and it's not happening again. Yeah. And that's where I realized, Mandarin Oriental or Jardines is something where values and very strong guiding principles are written very, very highly. And it's something I remember today. And when I saw him many years later, we were often laughing about it.
You remember that conversation?
Oh, I remember that conversation extremely well, especially the unpleasant one.
Well, it's great that he remembered it too.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important to remember that the words have weight. They carry tremendous weight. You've carried that with you for a long time, both positive and negative, right? Clearly, on the more positive side, you've framed it in a very positive light, and he didn't need to come back and apologize.
Not
right?
at all.
He's very senior. You were very junior at the time, but he chose to. right? So
that was very, very unique.
Yeah.
And I think
shows a bit of humility.
Yeah. And again, good reminder. I think we all have, moments where we misstep sometimes, but again, by correcting it, correct? And staying true to your personality and principles, correct? That's okay.
Yeah,
it's very human, correct?
Yeah.
And I think that's going back to what you said is Mandarin Oriental, I think as an organization is often very, very human. And I try to play my part in that as well.
Yeah, super.
So far, no other news there.
No other news. I mean, in terms of definitions, if we can kind of deconstruct hospitality, if we can deconstruct luxury a little bit, I would find that personally very interesting, because everyone's personal definition of luxury or hospitality or great service will differ, right? Slightly. So for me, if I try to encapsulate maybe luxury, for me, luxury is a collection of 1,000 tiny details. And in isolation, they don't seem like much, right? The choice of toiletries, the choice of aroma in the lobby, the music, the choice of texture and material. But in aggregate, there's this seamless kind of experience that says, it screams to you, I've got this, right? I've thought of you. I'm one step ahead of you. Don't worry. Hospitality, luxury, you've spent, a long, long time thinking about it, living it, breathing it more than I have. How do you view luxury and hospitality and service?
My favorite topic. We can speak long about it. No, because
we can go for 4 hours. I'll book the studio.
I think it's a very, very interesting question, because I think it reaches far beyond hospitality, correct? So let's start with hospitality, which I think everybody has really in their DNA in mind. And often when I try to explain newcomers, I said, look, they ask me, how do I give good service? And I often say, look, just think back home. If your friends are coming, you normally welcome them at the door. You take their coat or your jacket. You use your name, their name. Then you ask them in. Then you offer them something to drink. If the drink is empty, you offer them something else to drink, maybe something to eat. You set the table for them, you clear the table for them, and ultimately you're trying to give them, but yourself also a very good time.
Yes.
And then when they leave, you say thank you, and you say hopefully see you again. So that's hospitality for me. It's actually pretty simple. And I often think, my God, we sometimes get it terribly wrong, correct? But I think those 6 steps are really, really the art to hospitality. And what we do too when we have guests at home, so friends, I think humans are very good in also recognizing what's your personal need, correct? Or remembering your preferences. You might have sparkling water instead of still water, or you like it hot or cold. Again, and you do that very naturally in your house every time you have somebody over. So I think that's all there really is to hospitality, is to look after people and making sure they have a very, very good time. And that's actually, I have to say, what keeps me going until today. I love nothing more than making people happy.
Yes.
And hearing that they were happy, be that either through my own actions or very, very often through, the team to make that happen. And I think that's the most rewarding thing. And when I say guests, it includes the colleagues too. I often think, when we have, in our hotels, large groups of colleagues working for us, it's the same like a guest. They should come to work and be welcomed very warmly. They should be recognized, correct? We should help them to have a wonderful time. And when they leave at night, say thank you, goodbye, and please come back. And I think that often interferes or lays over each other very, very closely. So that's for me really the art of hospitality. And I think the Thais, together with people in Bhutan, have probably taught me that the best. Okay. And I think why? Because it's probably the rawest form of hospitality, correct? So there's not, people can have a lot or little. The amount of respect for each other, the amount of, giving each other, the amount of making sure each other are very, very happy, I think is probably, in Thailand until today, the most developed, or Bhutan was very similar, or Nepal, or parts of India. So I think where this community and self-respect for each other is still very strong, we'll probably find that in very, very natural ways. Correct?
Like you said, it's so natural, right? And maybe sometimes we overthink it because it's a corporate or a business situation. It comes from a place of genuine love and care. When your friends come over, just do that to other people, right?
And I was in the north of Thailand opening the Daradevi there, which was probably even less developed than the south, as in Phuket or Bangkok or so. And again, you felt that even stronger. And when I said earlier, I learned from them, I really learned in many ways from them on how to doing that. So I think, hospitality is very, very straightforward, very simple. But I think you have to want it. You have to enjoy it. And that's why I think sometimes in the West, we maybe struggle a little bit with it, correct? It's the same. If you go to a very remote location in Europe or in the US, you often find extremely good hospitality.
You do.
If you go to very fancy hotels in big cities, you scratch your head, because I think sometimes people are being forced to it or put in positions to just do it. Yeah. And that's probably the tricky part.
Yeah.
So,
well, we sometimes, I don't know, in the West, we almost want to put these artificial constraints and limits on our kindness and service. Like, I'll go this far for you, but I won't go beyond. Whereas, as you said, in Thailand, in Bhutan, in India, in certain parts of Asia, it feels like we don't have this artificial constraint on kindness or how far is too far, because I care about you. It's not about me.
Yeah, and sometimes I almost find we have an arrogance to it, right? Sometimes the fancier the hotel or the clothing store or the shop or whatever, we've all experienced this, correct? Where you sometimes have the staff who thinks they're more important than the customers, really. And that's a very, very dangerous conversation normally for the art of hospitality. But I think you said it earlier, maybe sometimes in the East, that's not as developed yet, correct? And maybe it has really also something to do with development as a thing. But I think it literally comes back to the fundamental level of respect and kindness to each other. Because I think you notice this in a bus or at a traffic light or in a supermarket often. Because I enjoy hospitality, I watch that a lot, where you can see who's practicing it and who's not.
Correct? Yes, correct.
So then to come to your second part, luxury. I mean, that's another, great topic we can spend a lot of time on. I think you mentioned it all. I think you can't just define what is luxury in one way. There's many little pieces to luxury. And I think luxury has also changed over the years tremendously. Like right now, and I think probably moving forward for the next decade or two, for me, real luxury is choice.
Okay.
And real luxury is recognizing you as a person and what choices you want, correct? For somebody, it can be luxury to show up at a luxury hotel and have a red carpet treatment and towels and tea and whatever. And for others, it's actually quite the opposite, correct? It's maybe to wheeze in without being noticed or recognized or even stopped or approached, correct? Then I'm one of those. And maybe because I work in it, but I don't need the red carpet and the welcome drink and the name and the people waiting and all of that. I rather have it quite the opposite. I find it the most annoying thing to...
Some people like the song and dance.
Which is fine. It's our industry to do it. But again, for me, it's the key here is the choice, correct? Yes, I would rather have the key on my phone almost and get to my room without anybody holding me up or stopping me or whatsoever, and then being able to kind of tailor-made what I need or not and engage when it's the right times. For others, it's this grand fanfare from the moment, including me, I would open your car door. And I think that's okay. I think, that's choice. And I think that what we have to learn really as luxury hotels moving forward. How can we offer you better that choice, or ask you in the beginning what type of luxury you want, correct? Is this very loud and recognizable, or is this very, very silent and thing? There's wonderful luxury hotels where you sleep in huts, correct?
Yes.
And again, for some people pay a lot of money for that, and that's luxury because they are on their own, correct? Or they don't have to deal with anything else. So defining that, I think, is the key. And we are trying to do this now here too, that we will offer different levels of luxury. And that it comes. I'm a bit with you. For me, it's important too. I like the materials, correct?
Yes.
I like to see the marble, the sheet.
Well, I think it's such luxury is such a multi-sensory experience as well, because again, this is not a plug for Mandarin Oriental, but just there's a signature scent for Mandarin Oriental. I don't know what it is, but I could nail it with my eyes closed. Like whenever I walk into the Mandarin Oriental in Hong Kong or the landmark Mandarin Oriental, for example, I know I'm there. Yep. Like if I smelt that somewhere else, I'd be like, that's the Mandarin Oriental. There's like a signature scent. It's the music, as you said, it's the texture of the materials, it's everything. So just making sure that everything is thoughtful and considered, I think is...
And I think that's, it's thoughtful for you, goes back to a little bit what I said about hospitality and preferences, correct? Ideally, we know what our customers want, and not only the customers at large, but I think luxury is knowing what the individuals want, correct? And how to give them, an experience which is very unique. There is a famous saying, what you know is hotels, this and this hotel is a home away from home. I, for example, think this is the most terrible sentence one can apply to a luxury hotel.
Yeah,
because I certainly don't go to a hotel to feel like home.
I want to get away from home. Yeah.
Again, either there could be too very detailed and intense service, or quite the complete opposite, to have peace. But I don't think you go to a hotel to feel like home.
I agree with you there. Yeah.
And again, that's what we really want to try to do. I almost like to say to the staff, I often say, look, we are here to really create illusion and dreams, correct?
Yes.
For a certain period of time. And that is really what we want to walk away with. That somebody, once they leave, have memories and dreams they remember and come back, correct?
Yeah.
Children have moved a lot into that space, very interestingly enough, right? We are both being parents. I think that plays more and more role, that we make sure children have an amazing experience, because they are often the parents to tell where they are. Our luxury is, for me, that we provide those parents, correct, the necessarily engagements, tools, experiences, that their children are happy, because often when the kids are happy, correct, the parents are very happy.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
I think luxury has many, many, many facets. I think there's some basic elements for sure for it.
Yeah.
But it's really, shaping it to the individual.
Yes. I think as the demographics change and, Gen Z and come into it and older generations move out, how do you see, or how have you seen that definition of luxury and good service changing? What are the demands of guests changing? You've seen it for 20 odd years now.
I think, again, luxury to a baby boomer is very, very different than luxury to a millennial. Right. And I think that will also be our biggest challenge, not only for Mandarin Oriental, but for a lot of luxury brands, because I think you see brands becoming less and less important. Okay. Yes, maybe to some degree, still in fashion and cars. I'm going to go back, right? But I think the younger generations, it's not so much what brand it is. It is more, again, how do I engage the brand with you as an individual? What experience did I had? What memory, what illusion, what dream we created for you? Recently I was just in China for 2-3 weeks, which I find very fascinating. And it probably came up in the media, but I think there was a bit of I'm not sure if you can call it scandal, but I think 20 Instagrammers or influencers, no Instagram in China, WeChatters, had booked a room at the Bulgari.
Okay.
So that they can each take a photo in the room. None of them ever stayed there. Right. Neither could they afford the room. But they all wanted a piece of the room, or showing to somebody that they had it. Yeah,
it's that conspicuous consumption.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think while you have pockets of that, and that will still be there, I think, again, it's not the brand per se what does it, correct? The brand will drag you in. It's the moment to be while you're in it. What really, really creates the loyalty and where you are. And I think that's going to be a bit tricky for brands, because we have to play to many, many, many different facets, correct?
Yes.
I love, in Mandarin, we often say we are not a hotel company, we are a collection of hotels.
Okay.
Each hotel is very, very different, correct? You've witnessed this. You can be in one Mandarin and then come to another, and except for probably the service culture or the very genuine care, the red line is sometimes different, and that's by design. And I hope we will keep that for many, many more years in our growth strategy and here to come. Because again, I think it's important to keep this individualism, this sense of place wherever you are, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller.
Yes.
Right. To provide the customers with choice.
Yes. Completely
that's
agree.
The key.
Yeah.
And so, back to branding, I think it will be harder to market to that audience. It will be harder to create brand loyalty. I think there's less and less brand loyalty.
Yes.
It's the experience piece and the memory piece what will create loyalty to some degree, and that can be very different in very, very different locations.
Yeah. Well, I think that sense of place, the terroir of the hotel, as you say, is really, really important, right? I like that the distinction that it's a collection of hotels as opposed to each hotel being identikit and identical. I do think that level of bespokeness is interesting.
And that's the biggest risk in expansion, I find, correct?
Yes.
Very often, if you look at, small hotels, one-offs, two-offs, boutique hotels, again, they have that raw element, correct? Because there is no guideline what is being rolled out through multiple ones. Yeah. Yet when you grow, you need to have some form of guidelines. But I think that's our number one priority, that we keep it as a collection rather than trying to make too many tasks mainstream and kind of roll them out over and over and over again. Yeah.
To kind of draw a nice circular line back to I think it was one of your very first sentences, that hospitality is really about people and it's about that human connection. That's quite a hard thing to scale, right? Because it really boils down to the personality and the human touch of each individual GM, each individual employee in each different hotel. And that's kind of the thing that has to remain constant: the level of service, the level of attention, the genuine desire to create a dreamlike experience for the guest. That has to remain a constant. And so many things now, the hot topic is AI, it's artificial intelligence. But really, when it boils down to luxury hospitality, it's still about this. It's about the human connection. It's about that genuine sincerity to serve. And I'm not sure how AI comes for the hotel industry. I don't know if you have a view on that, but for me, it's we value things that are scarce, right? And the human connection is getting more and more scarce, which is why we're doing this in person. We could have done it on Zoom. It wouldn't have been as interesting to me or to you to do that. It's the same reason we still go to events live instead of in the metaverse. We still stay in a hotel instead of putting on a set of VR goggles and pretending we're at a hotel.
Yeah, I mean, goes back to, it's funny, way in the years before AIs, when hotel companies were rolling out standards and kind of scripts for every employee to say the same thing. Okay. And some hotel companies are very famous for those, correct? Without mentioning any names. And I think that, is very dangerous, correct? Because I think, or I certainly in my hotel here or wherever I was, always encourage our colleagues to be who they are. Yes. And none of us is the same. Some walk a little bit different, talk a little bit different, serve a little bit different. But I think in recent years, we have seen that has become more and more important, correct? And these very scripted kind of interactions really are finding less and less resistance. And again, we have to push back on those. And it's funny, we have standards in certain scripts, but I often like to remind the colleagues, look, it's rather than me telling you this is how you get from A to B. You will get there. Maybe there's some, guidelines or some tracks we can stay in. But I really encourage everybody to be who they are and do it in their very, very own way, which in a way is funny. We have mystery shoppers and all of that good stuff. I've never been a big friend of this because you really look at people compared to a script and certain standards. And I think standardization in luxury can be challenging and dangerous. And that brings me to AI, because what is AI doing? AI very often operates on certain patterns, correct? Yes. And again, I think the moment you get into repetitive patterns and repeat them over and over again, you're taking away the fun. You're taking away the individualism. I have to say, though, probably 3 or 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to meet Sophia in Saudi Arabia, or in Neom to be particular. And I think she has just made, again, a bit of headway. And that was quite frightening, fascinating, and
Sophia
scary
the robot,
at the same
for context,
time.
we're talking about the same Sophia.
Because she was able to get into the conversation on the game without being repetitive, right? Okay. Because through AI, while you would have a conversation with her and tell her where you're from, where you work, whatever, she could form conversations which are completely different who she ever was engaged with. So I think that form of AI could be very interesting, because I'm also a big supporter of AI in hotels. And we have some robots here, I had some in America, who repeat monotone tasks like clearing dirty dishes, delivering toothbrushes to rooms. Yes. We started in the US, I started that already, with a delivery robot ways before COVID. And I remember some people in Mandarin weren't too happy that we introduced a robot. But for the customer, it was very exciting, because what do you do in the US when somebody brings you a key card or a toothbrush or whatever? Somebody comes with a key and you have to tip the person, right? Yeah. And that fell away with a robot. And it was a repetitive task of delivering something to a room. It wasn't serving a meal or whatever. And they actually enjoyed it to interact with the robot. So I think AI can be, for those kind of tasks, be very,
it has
very
its
good.
place. Yeah,
Here
definitely.
in our hotel, we have one who clears dirty dishes, correct? Instead of a busboy doing that, like in the old days, they load the robot and the robot brings it to the dishwasher. So there, I think AI can be very, very handy. And I tell you why, because I think it will allow us to focus our attention with the colleagues more onto the guests rather than back of house tasks or delivery linen to pantries or water. Or there's a lot of things where I think AI can come in really, really handy to hospitality to make sure the human aspect can be more focused on the guests. So I think we have to be open to it.
Sure.
Will we have robots behind the front desk? Hopefully not so soon.
I personally hope not, but
in some properties it might come, in some hotel. But should you be again able on your mobile phone to get your key, which is already existing in many hotels, for those who don't want to see anybody, go to your room, set your light settings and all of that through AI? Absolutely. All right. So I think we shouldn't cut it out. But the human element, I also very, very firmly believe
me too,
will never go away. And it can't, because this emotional connection, not even a Sophia can build up, correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah. In terms of, one thing I will say about you is, I think as a GM, it's very important to be personable. You're always you're the face and the voice of a property. I love spending time with you because you're always high energy, you're always positive, you're always optimistic, but you are balancing an awful lot. You've got 4 kids, your lovely wife, Julia. You've got a complete renovation of the Mandarin Oriental happening now under a very tight time frame. You've got to turn it around before F1 in September. How are you balancing all of your different priorities? What are some of the mental kind of tricks and tips or, mindset switches that you've adopted over the years to help you balance all these different priorities? You're exceptionally busy, but you still have the energy to always be well-mannered, polite, personable, charming. How do you keep recharging your battery? What gives you energy?
I'm smiling because I sometimes ask myself the same question.
Why am I smiling today?
I think it's a mindset, correct?
Yes.
I've always been somebody who has enjoyed to do many, many things at the same time. I remember in the Taipei opening, for example, I was finishing up my MBA, had our daughter, or not me, my wife, but I was there
she
to
put in the hard
support
work.
mentally, correct? She put in all that work and opened the hotel. And many people say, oh my God, how can you do this? Or now it's similar for it. I think it goes back to, it's the mindset, correct? It's all these tasks come, and I think often I'll try to prioritize. I often try to really do, when there's family time, there's family time. Although if you would ask my wife Julia, she would probably tell you something very different, correct? And say, no, in between, he still checks 10 emails and sends 5 SMS. But I think I'll try the time when I'm there to be focused on the kids, for example, and be with them. And at the same time, I request or require from them very often, and sometimes we have arguments about that, when I say, look, when I'm at work, correct? Don't bother me with a million other things. We often have this, I say, we can do that before or after, because when I'm at the hotel, I want to play hotel and I want to focus on the hotel and the employees. And that has somehow always worked for me to maybe kind of bucket these tasks.
To compartmentalize, I think is crucial.
Make sure I focus on something, what I'm doing right now, rather than a million things. And often that is like many of us have, I think, many, many balls in the air without dropping one. I think the key is not to drop one. And I guess the happiness or getting not stressed over it, maybe that's also is a little bit of luck. I'm just in general a person, I wake up in the morning and it's a new day. It's a new beginning. Or sometimes when I fall down or being knocked down, I'll get up again and say, hey, that's what it is. I think I believe a lot in everything happens for a reason. So sometimes don't get too angry or frustrated about it. And I say, sometimes we don't see it in the moment, but we will see it much later. But I think this general level of happiness helps me a lot. I look at things positive, and I do a lot of running, cycling, being outdoors in nature, cycling here. The running is really something for me, what I think, what allows me to stay very, very positive. And then little things can be, the children being happy, the guests being happy. I think I allow myself to be happy about little things in life. And that's the key. And that somehow helps me to deal with all these different tasks.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love it. I often say that happiness is a choice. You can choose to be happy.
Totally.
And how you perceive something is quite often down to you, right? Whether you perceive it as negative or positive.
Absolutely.
And there's so little upside from perceiving the negative and seeing the pessimistic side of every situation. So,
and yet it's funny, we encounter a lot of people. Yeah, I agree with you. And yet we encounter a lot of people who I sometimes try to help a little bit to see things more positively. But I think fundamentally it's you yourself who have to have that approach, correct? And as you and I know, I think often then things in life are also a lot easier, correct?
Definitely.
When you try to look for the more positive ones. But that's not always easy. But I think lots of sport, happiness at home, happiness at work, that kind of shapes it and helps it and allows you to deal with tasks more and more.
Definitely. No, I love that. And I think you definitely, you receive or you attract what you put out into the world, right? When you come out, suited and booted, front of the hotel, and you're putting out positive energy, you're smiling at everyone, you're welcoming everyone, that's going to invite a more positive reaction from other people. And, that we all have our down days. So sometimes I'll just be in a worse mood than others. Generally, I'm pretty optimistic and happy. But when you go into a situation already a little bit demotivated, a little bit lacking in energy, enthusiasm, it seems like everyone else is also in a bad mood, where it's really often coming from you, right? And you can kind of spread that. It's contagious. That passion, that enthusiasm, that happiness is contagious, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is, clearly is. Yeah. But I often try, when you say about those down moments, which I think is important too to talk about, right? I think even happy people are not always happy. I'm sure you have.
What goes up must come down.
Yeah, right? I certainly have sometimes a moment where I'm totally down too, correct?
Yeah.
I think what I'll try to do is deal with that, what you said earlier. I try not to affect others with this.
Okay. Don't infect
others with it. So then I go and run on my own, or I go cycling or swimming or kayaking, whatever it is. It's interesting. Sometimes my wife says, I think women in general like to talk, probably a little bit more through these things. I become extremely quiet and deal with that with myself. Yes. And again, that helps me. And then being out in nature by myself helps me a lot to overcome down moments. And I think down moments are important too, correct? Sure. Even if you're a positive outlook, even in downtime, I often find you find a lot of positive energy again to say, you know what? Let's give that another shot.
Yes. Can you tell me what's been the most challenging thing that you've had to overcome, either at work or in your personal life? We're talking about, I think it's important that people realize that people, I think, like yourself and myself, they generally see us as very positive and happy and outgoing. It's important for people to recognize that we've overcome challenges as well.
I think actually that kind of attitude has always been also my most challenging moments.
Yeah, okay.
I have often had people, I don't know if that creates jealousy. I really think it does. I often had people who try, because of my positivity, energy, I do things very fast, who tried to knock me over.
They tried to puncture
it. Turn me down. And one could argue it's probably called politics, right? And it probably is. But I think if I think back of my most challenging moments, the most happiest and most motivating moments with people are also the most challenging ones. Okay. With, I think through my personality or through this happiness and all of this, I also create certain enemies. And my biggest challenges were caused by other people who tried to bring me down through certain reactions or trying to influence other opinions, and try to harm me this way. And that actually, I have to say, that maybe goes back to being somebody very positive, that I find also the hardest to deal with. And I have to sometimes accept, look, not everybody likes you.
Yes.
And to who you are making enemies, and those enemies are really your enemies. I have very few enemies in my life. So me personally against others. So I often struggle with that.
Yes.
And again, for me, it doesn't matter who you are, how you are. If you're maybe not my chemistry, I leave you alone. I don't try to kind of negative certain people. But I've noticed over the years that there are some humans who are just not like that. They're just nasty people, I guess, at least from my point of view. And that have been my biggest challenges to overcome this and to stay focused and ahead, because ultimately, the older I get, I guess I deal best with is that I just accept that fact that there are people who do not like me.
Yeah. And I think that acceptance comes with age, comes with maturity.
Probably.
Yeah.
And that have been my biggest challenges. And I had that a few times in my career where I could feel they were trying to bring me down, to stop me, to slow me down.
Yeah.
And again, I think the more and more I accept it, that will always be there. And me not getting engaged in that's often has become kind of my tactic. I just stay far away from that.
Okay.
That has worked. But that have been the biggest challenges.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm very, very blessed that, similar to you, I have an incredible wife who just, when I say, okay, let's move now, who just says, okay. And I think if that wouldn't be there,
sure.
And we have moved together 10 or 12 times, that has
it's a lot to ask of
someone. A lot of challenges away from me, because for me, it's pretty easy no matter where in the world.
Sure.
I work into a tower or a resort where things, they look very pretty. And most of the people are very nice. Things are organized. And even though there's challenges at work, but it's pretty much the same structure.
Yeah.
Julia, my wife, has to often deal with the outside world.
Yes.
Which that is a lot more challenging, correct?
Yeah.
So I give a lot of credit to her that a lot of my challenges are actually handled by her. Same with children. I think bringing up children and being a stay-home mom or a stay-home dad, whoever does it fully, those are real challenges.
Yeah, that's incredibly challenging.
I can often deal with that for a couple of hours, and then I'm very happy that I can return to work. And I always admit this very openly, because I really feel this way. I'm not sure if I could do sometimes what many moms and dads who are really at home all the time deal with children. I think, again, children are an incredible blessing and an incredible joy, but they can be incredibly challenging.
Of course they can, right? Those who love the most have the most power to hurt us as well. So, but I think it's an incredible life hack, actually. The choice of the choice of partner is so underrated as a force multiplier for your career, for your success, for your happiness as a person. As you said, if you'd married someone who was a lot more resistant to change, who was less supportive, that's going to hold you back in every area of your life. And it's so challenging to be the one who is almost the trailing spouse, whether that's a husband or wife or partner, whatever it is. It's incredibly taxing on them, and them releasing you to attack your career in the way that you want to. That's really, really powerful.
Yeah, good. So big thank you to my better half. Who has kept up with that for many, 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 many
Behind
years.
every great man, as they say, right?
Really. And I think there's a lot of truth, as you said, vice versa, right? In both ways. But that is very, very critical and very, very important. And, allows you to really do and rise. I have to say, though, I think you have to also find your better half there in a way, correct? Yeah. I can certainly speak on behalf of Julia and I. We both enjoy very much living in different cultures. We actually often say, hey, we are utterly blessed that we are allowed to move around, correct? Yes. Often when we speak to friends at homes, they think we're a bit cuckoo. And I guess likewise, we think they're a little bit cuckoo to still be in the same area. But living in different cultures and different countries and different religions and different parts of the world we certainly find extremely rewarding, and we're often happy that our children have the opportunity to see this home, correct? We have the United Nations, each of them born somewhere else. It's good for them.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, you can see it as a tax or a blessing, right? Depending on how you frame it, that ability or need to move all around the world. But wherever you've gone, you and Julia and the 4 kids now, what's one value or principle that you've always tried to bring to your life?
Family.
Family, always. Family first.
We often or I often repeat it whenever Sunday nights is kind of our big family dinner. Unfortunately, even though I've promised it many times that we must have a meal together every day, that sometimes didn't work in the morning and certainly doesn't work at night. But so Sunday nights, we normally do this. And whenever we are together, I think we often say, hey, what's the most important thing and what's the principle that has held us together? And that's family. And I think, again, when you move around and when you're in places, not so familiar, and you can relate to this, you grow as a family much closer together often, correct?
Yes.
They are your closest friends. I often say, my wife Julia is also my best friend because we are often in environments where we have to start making new friends, where we don't have anybody else. And that's nice. And that's what we try to do with the kids too. And that's the one principle that we try to instill in them, is to really make sure that they know we are there as a family. And that doesn't happen often as harmonious as it sounds, correct?
But we try.
We also fight and yell, and the dinner tables are often sometimes, more chaos than that. Yeah. But I think we try, and I think in a way they get it. And I think that's the one thing we stick to.
Yeah. No, I love that. The intent has been set to spend time as a family unit. And I often say to people, no matter what successes I've had, I'm sure same for you, whatever wins you've had in your career, if my wife and kids were upset, it's for nothing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think it's protecting time, correct? Like I often, struggle with, or I try to protect that family time and them being together with, when there are these temptations of going and play golf or mountain biking or whatever.
You're talking about when I texted you for golf last week.
Weekends and stuff like that. And I'm really careful to often say, no, the day off, the weekend is for them, and they come first, and I want to do things with them rather than, cheeking off and whatever, doing my thing. And I think that so far has been a good formula for us.
Awesome. Yeah.
One day they probably will say, we don't want to do stuff with you on Saturday
until then.
But until then, I will fight for them.
Yeah, we'll keep Saturday sacred until then. Yeah. One thing I find interesting about, a lot of general managers, yourself in particular, I know you live in the property that you work in up until very recently. Obviously, the hotel is under renovation right now. So how do you maintain those kind of lines of division and compartmentalize everything? Because you have little to no privacy at times. You're the GM of the hotel. You live in the hotel. You live on site. All your staff are there. It's quite hard to keep that separation, because I think from the outside, a lot of people would say, oh, this is amazing. You get to live in a suite in a 5-star hotel, beautiful, everything looked after. But there is a cost to everything.
Interesting point. And we have had postings live in, live out. Now here we live in the hotel again. I go a little bit back to those boutique hotels, those country hotels, the single standing alone hotels. Often those owners and operators, they live in the hotel.
Yes.
So I think, first of all, as a good hotelier, I'm a very, very firm believer that you live in the hotel.
Okay.
I think you feel, you breathe, you see the hotel very differently. You see your team very differently, because you are there. All the time. And I think they see you very differently, correct? Yes. They not just see you as the boss, they see you with your family, they see you in off hours. You build a very, very different connection with the team. So I enjoy that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm, of course, very selfish to drag my family with into that, because I'm sure for them, that's not always this way. Or I know now, with the kids, when we moved here, we had a long session with them to say, look, it's you are really on the watch all the time, correct? You have to behave. There is no running. There's no screaming. There's no, there's yes, please, waiting in line, yada, yada, yada. But again, I think it teaches them also a good way of discipline.
Yes.
And they've certainly taken it in very, very well that, they do not become, Kevin alone at home kind of. I think they own and run the hotel and just go everywhere and take things. Quite the opposite. And I've been very strong with the team here that I said, look, if the children are in areas or behaving in certain ways they shouldn't, you let me know and you push back on them, right? Because otherwise we're going to create little monsters. So I think they have adjusted to that very well. I enjoy it anyway. So in general, I'm very happy with it. To answer your question, how you deal with privacy, again, is a little bit, it is what it is approach. And I said to the team, look, if I live in the hotel, I'm not going to be in a suit 24/7.
Yes.
Correct? I'm sometimes
you're going to see me on my pajamas sometimes.
in my shorts and t-shirt. And the same with guests. But also with guests is interesting. They respond to that actually very happily, because I think they see you again as a person, not just the general manager of a hotel and the unit. And I have over the years developed this tendency when I close my door that I can really switch off. And I really can. And I think a lot of this relates to...
I don't think a lot of people would be able to do that.
Yeah, and I often ask myself the same, but then I some of the things when I go home, is in the US, for example, we lived outside because it's very uncommon. But I didn't behave any differently just because I drove home for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I still looked at my mails. I still enjoyed, doing WhatsApp and engaging with people. And I think a lot of it relates back to, again, I enjoy a lot what I do. It's often not work really, correct?
Yes.
I often say others play, certain sports. I play hotel, and I think that allows me to switch off and yet never switch off. Yeah. I think this segregation between work and private somehow overlaps, and I'm okay with that in both ways. And I think my family is somehow okay with that. They have to sometimes remind me and say, "Hey, now is our time and not the hotel." But I think that helps me a lot to switch off, and I have a lot of trust in the team too. I know they will not call me for a rotten apple at 11 p.m. or so, correct?
Yeah.
Solve
it yourself.
Or a certain complaint, and I trust in them that they can solve it, and they really can. And at the same time, I know if they really, call me and something is happening, I think they know too. I'll be there to help them. So it works very well, and I'm a real supporter of, as a hotelier, to live and breathe and experience what your guests experience. Correct?
I love that. I think it's skin in the game, right? You've got skin in the game. You're living there, breathing it, and you get a real sense of the hotel, and they see you as a three-dimensional human being. I think it's great,
and that helps a lot.
Yeah,
they see that they not just see you as their
a boss,
leader or boss, or their team member. They also see a lot of your very, very private side, correct? Yeah, and I'm sure many things, get by and unheard of, but that's fine. I think the other thing we always did is when we lived in, that we always used our furniture, our same kind of wall colors. So it's funny, the colors in our apartment looks very similar to what the kids had in the kids' rooms in the US. So they feel good about this. But
nice.
I think often children are good measures of how things work, and I can certainly say on mine, they manage that very well. The only downside sometimes for them, I would wish there would be more of a cul-de-sac or driveway where I could open the door and there are other kids, correct? So that's the one thing we have to compensate a little bit and bring them more into environment where more children, because they certainly don't have that.
So you have to actively seek that out for the kids.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I get it. But I think you found yourself, either by accident or by design, you're in that perfect sweet spot where, as you said, your work doesn't feel like work, it feels like play. Because in terms of career advice, I often like to say to people, what feels like play to you, but feels like work to others? And you're playing hotel, as you said. Some people play sports, I play hotel. And thus it doesn't feel like work. You have the enthusiasm to power through when times get tough. You can close the door and you can kind of keep it where it is. But it always bleeds over the line, right? Between work and play, work and leisure. You're in a great spot.
Yep.
If I go back to kind of career advice or life advice, what's maybe some pieces of career advice that you hear young people receive a lot in the hospitality world that you actually think is detrimental, that you actually think is bad advice? Is there anything that you hear often that people should do, or
listen to advice?
Listen to advice. Don't listen to anyone. Don't listen to me.
No, I think you have to listen to some degree to advice, but I think I really mean this serious. We are sometimes in this over-advising stage, right? Which starts with our education system, that we try to push people into certain things to learn and grade them. And it's funny, I did a MBA maybe 10 years ago, and if I look back, that was the first time where I really wanted to learn.
Okay.
And I think especially when you're young, you get kind of pushed into these buckets, what you are meant to do, be that through your studies.
That's so early.
And ways too early, correct? And I really think, and that's why I'm always very careful with advice, or the one advice I often give is really listen to yourself, correct? And listen to your gut and try. I think it's all about trying. And I think it's never too late to try different things, change things, keep learning. Like I love learning. I my life long. But I didn't like it as a student, funny enough, correct?
Yeah.
I had to get to a certain age, and now if I can do, courses on certain universities in very, very different subjects, I find that extremely interesting to read. And I think that's we try to force young people into certain brackets or stigmas, what we think to do. And we always say, can I give you an advice? I think if you need to figure that out yourself. What it's good to ask for advice. I ask a lot for advice too from people who have more experience and whatever, but I try to then kind of make my own opinion out of this and do this. So
the value of listening to your gut instinct.
That I think is key, and to really find something what you enjoy. Correct. Again, I think a lot of children are being put in certain places not because they want to do that, but because their parents think that's right for them. Correct. I remember my own dad when I said I want to do hotels, he was furious and said, people stay in hotels, they don't work in hotels. Furious. He didn't, I think, speak for me for a couple of months. But that at the same time, I was allowed to kind of just do that. And I think finding what you enjoy, that is the best advice for it. You have to find what you enjoy. And that sometimes comes very hard with trying different things. And I think earlier when we spoke a little bit about happiness and unhappiness, there's a lot of people who do things they do not enjoy doing.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. They're forced by others.
Probably the worst situation you can be in.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that leads to a lot of unhappiness.
I agree.
For young people, I think try until you find what you really enjoy. And then sometimes when that is maybe not the perfect career, or where probably all the people say, oh my God, you can't make a living from that. And I think again, you have to push through and do. And if you enjoy that, you will find your way.
Yes. That's great advice for someone who says, don't listen to advice.
That's my best advice, really.
Yeah. No, I think the sentiment resonates with me because I think I've also gone against the wishes of others in terms of my career. Obviously, I'm guessing there's a love and respect for your father, but also a steadfastness that I'm going to pursue this, even though you don't think it's a good idea and you're not going to speak to me for a couple of months. I'm still going to do it anyway. Because I think any major regret I've ever had in my life, it's when I knew in my gut that it was the right thing to do and I didn't listen.
Yep.
I overthunk it and I thought I intellectualized my way out of it. I should have just followed my first instinct.
But
Something
I think that's
told
a
me
very
it was
human
wrong.
trait, correct?
Yeah.
Because I think we want to find logic in our decisions.
Yes.
And I agree with you, Mike, 100%. The worst decisions I have done is I listened too much to other people's advice who influenced my decision. Yeah. And my first gut decision was the right decision.
That was the right one.
I should have just stick to it. But it's hard to do this all the time as a human being, correct?
Yes.
Because I think naturally we want to seek advice. I think naturally we want to make sure we find credibility in our decisions through others, correct? And it's very hard to say if everybody goes right, no, I go left.
Yeah. Well, there's been numerous psychological studies to show how difficult it is to be the one that says no when everyone else says yes, or to say this is green when everyone else says it's red. It takes a lot of conviction and self-belief, right? So, good. Before we get into some of the final questions about kind of principles and kind of your hopes for the future, it would be remiss of me not to talk about the renovation happening at the Singapore property, the Mandarin Oriental, right? It's undergoing rather a huge, complete rehaul. This is no minor renovation. This is $100 million US dollar transformation. So if you could kind of tell people, what was the property like before? What's your hopes and dreams for it in the next 5 months or so? What's the goal? What's the dream there? You're in the business of dream making, as you said earlier. So what's the dream for this property?
So it's interesting for me because I've been here twice, which seldomly happens, correct? I was here from 2008 to 2013. At that time as an EAM, executive assistant manager, overseeing food and beverage. So it's very unique to come back to a hotel in a city, what you know. Yeah. And unique in a way that it helps you to form your strategy, your belief, and your road path much quicker because you've kind of tested it before, you've seen it, what works, what doesn't work. And when I walked in here last year on the 2nd of January, I had a shock.
Really?
Because it looked the same. Okay. Like when I left 2012.
Then nothing had changed.
Not much had changed. And again, no judgment here, no right or wrong. Business levels in Singapore were extremely strong over the last 20 years, almost to say, or probably from 2006 onwards. And none of the hotels had really shut down to renovate, because why would you? If you're over 90% occupancy all the time, business is flowing. Correct. We are a business.
Yeah.
That means the customer is happy to keep paying the price for the product they get, so keep going. So it's interesting. A lot of hotels in Singapore have gone through a very similar pattern. Mandarin Oriental Singapore, of course, for us, an important hotel, correct? Because we started in Hong Kong, then Bangkok came, then Singapore came, and I've often said we're kind of the golden triangle of Mandarin Oriental. And I think, both Mandarin Oriental, but also Jardines is deeply not only property, but emotionally invested in Singapore. So it's an important property for us, for the group, and for the major shareholder. And at the same time, if I can be a bit self-critique here, or have a bit of self-critique, we probably went a little bit too far by not doing this renovation a bit earlier.
Got it.
And I think it became almost not brand threatening, but we kind of put the brand there. And I think that was another factor what played into it. We had a lot of, in the last 5 or 6 years, new hotels in Europe and in the Middle East. And I think we saw more and more, if somebody had just stayed in Milan or in Dubai or in the renovated London and came to Singapore, they had the same moment I had. They went in and said, "What is this?" And it's funny, in the year I was here, a couple of very regular clients who came and said, "Oh, you're now there, we come," and they lasted for about 5 minutes, because they said, "Philip, we love you deeply, but we are not staying here." What is this?
Yeah, it's the ugly duckling of the collection.
And again, for all good reasons. So the transformation, or the renovation, or I call it a transformation, was a little bit overdue, I have to say. And so when I arrived, that was kind of the first thing we got really pushing for. Because again, difficult time. We probably should have done it during COVID, but you couldn't, because Singapore was kind of very closed.
Yeah.
Do you then really want to do it in an up level where you can? So it took a lot of internal arguments to convince the right people to give a check. Then I said, yes, we are about to reopen the country, or the world, and yet we are closing for a renovation. Again, from a shareholder versus an operator perspective, very, very good to understand. Somebody who has lost money said, "Hey, we finally want to make some money again," and not shutting down the hotel. So that was an interesting journey, and again, an interesting learning in a way. But I'm glad we all kind of came to the conclusion that now is the right time to do it. And we closed it in March. The scale, what we do in this hotel, is from top to bottom. That we basically really de-shell it and do everything new. Because the other thing, if you don't renovate for 36 years, there are electricity, pipes, correct, technology, all of this is gone. So a lot of the money will actually go behind walls, what nobody will ever see, to bring the building back to its modernization. So normally a project like that would probably take 12 to 18 months.
And you're doing it in 6.
But we have to do it in 6 months, correct? Because going back to that, if this hotel is offline, it's painful for shareholders, correct? But Singapore can do it in 6 months, and I'm convinced we can. And if I look at the progress in working 24/7, correct, having the amount of crew members on board we have, they're doing an incredible job. Last week we were a week ahead of the demolition schedule.
Okay, good.
So I feel quite strong about it. The tricky part will always be furniture, because they get often custom made. And certainly in my last 2 renovations in DC and in Boston, we had to put back old furnitures into the room because the furnitures got stuck in China. So that cannot happen here, knock on wood. But I'm very confident we can do it. And it's a very, very exciting project because it's a transformation, correct? All bathrooms will be new, all guest rooms will be new F&B concepts, new colors. I think for a lot of guests and colleagues, it was hard to close the hotel because it had been, an icon, and it had kind of be the first hotel, if you think about in the Marina Bay area 36 years ago. So there were a lot of emotions attached to that hotel. And when it comes back, it will come back in a very, very, very different look. Everything what was kind of this 80s corporate, very masculine, dark stone brown will be light and fresh and transformed. And I think that is very exciting. And when we sat down with our marketing agency, they asked me, they said, what do we play on? How about the history? And I kind of was play on the history. So isn't the Raffles the history? And they, they reminded me, they said, no, you guys have been here the first in the Marina Bay,
right,
together with then Pan Pacific and Park Royal. And I said, yeah, you're absolutely right. So it is nice to take something very historic and bring it into the future, into the past. And I think the location is superb. The new product will be superb. The service offerings will be unique and consistent in Mandarin Oriental. So to answer your question, how I see the future, I see the future of the hotel very, very bright. Thanks to the Singapore government, I think we're in a good spot in Singapore, is fair to say too.
Yeah,
I see the future of Singapore extremely bright. So when you add all this together, correct? New product, good service, right location, correct?
Cities on the right trajectory.
Cities on the right trajectory. My God, I think we're in an extremely good place, which makes me really, really exciting about.
Yeah. A lot of exciting times ahead. So presumably it'll be open in time for Formula One in September, which is obviously huge. It has to be. It has to be. Otherwise someone's head is on a stick.
We have 2 Formula One teams arriving, I think, 2 days after opening. So
okay. All right.
Finding for them an alternative hotel in a busy city, I do not want to go through.
No. That's not an email back and forth you want to engage in. Okay, so we've got a couple of teams staying, which would be amazing. It's opening, I think, at exactly the right time of year. You're going to have a lot more celebrity guests, I'm sure, coming through that revolving door over time. Can you think of are there any kind of amusing anecdotes or just bizarre requests from, people like Formula One drivers in the past, or celebrities who we cannot name?
My God. Yeah, we can write a book about this.
Yeah, what are some of the weird things that people ask for?
Every hotel you can probably, tell a few stories along those lines. I think speaking of Formula One, we had a very interesting one, and I guess he has retired, so we can mention his name, was with Michael Schumacher, who stayed with us when he was with Mercedes, and wanted to go and buy underwear in 100 pieces of the same time. I don't know why you need that in Formula One. Yes.
Why do you need 100 pieces of underwear?
But what I liked about that story was that I said, okay, we're going to get the limousine ready. And he said, no, can we not take the train or the bus? Okay. And he took the MRT to Orchard Road, and he was, and we were with him, and he was fascinated that nobody would recognize him in the MRT, and taking a photo and whatsoever. And he literally took the MRT to Orchard Road, went shopping, we took the MRT back to the hotel, and nobody realized it. Yeah. That was fun. But yeah, as a good hotelier, we can't dissolve all the funny stories. No. There are. And we are often here to make these things happen behind the scenes so people see it. But plenty of stories.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I'll wait for the book, right? When you're retired, we can release a book. All the names will be changed to protect the innocent. I think that's probably the best way to do it. Awesome. So in terms of kind of final questions, I always like to, end on some principles, and we've touched on some great ones already. I think I've really enjoyed it. What are you most proud of all the things you've accomplished so far, professionally, personally? What are you most proud of?
Big question, no?
I don't ask more questions.
I'm most proud of who I am and who I have become, to be honest. And that's both at work as well as privately, to, be a happy father of 4 in an intact family. If I look back many years, I would have not necessarily seen that. So that makes me very, very proud, and that we are in a good place. And it makes me very proud where I have become, in my career, from these very humble beginnings as a dishwasher, where I am today. And when I say most proud where I am, then that's often actually more so the people I was able to touch, correct? Yeah. I enjoy nothing else more than bringing people from management trainees to general managers. And there is a couple where I look back where I said, hey, I see my handwriting on their back. And that makes me extremely proud. I think, we couldn't be in this industry if it's not for people. And I enjoy being with people and leading people. And that makes me feel extremely proud that, I'll have a few next to me who, have gone very, very far, and to lead it and be responsible for people and lead them through all the good and bads. That makes me proud. COVID was quite a tremendous test to that, correct? Leading team through COVID.
Yes.
And especially in the US was harsh, I have to say, because in the US layoffs are much more common and more part of the overall business model.
They're quick to happen. Yeah.
They are very, very quick in hiring and very, very quick in firing. And again, how we maneuver through all of that, made me very proud as a leader. But yeah, a bit of selfishness here, as you said earlier. I'm proud that I'm happy with who I am.
Yeah.
And that I wake up every day happy and energetic to, be that at work or be that with my family or friends to touch people and hopefully make them happy.
Well, I think that's great. I think one of the ways we measure a life is how many other people we've touched, as you said. How have we helped others? How have we been of service to others? And to see your fingerprints on someone who's done very well, and you can feel and see that you've touched them in a positive way. You've helped them on their way. I think that's a beautiful way to measure success and to measure a life. So very, very nice. Are there any memorable words that you kind of hold very dear to you? Is there something that someone said to you personally a long time ago or very recently, even just words that you carry with you?
Yeah, I'm a very firm believer in having mentors and coaches along the way, correct?
Yeah.
I think everybody needs that, and who hasn't found theirs better finds them. And I think they can change in life, in your careers, and probably both privately as well as in words. But I think what I said earlier, for me, what somebody once said to me, look, everything happens for a reason and you just have to accept it and trust in that process. That's something what has sticked for me always. And I think that's a real, life principle, what can help a lot, correct? Others would be, treat others the way you want to be treated. We have heard this many times, yet I think execution is often very poorly.
Yeah.
I think those are words which have often, stick me, or whenever I don't and fail to do it, I remind myself of it. That's another, very good way to do it. And one I will never forget was very, very early in my career, and that's career driven. But somebody said to me, look, success is really your choice. And it's not forced. You can't learn that. It's up to you. If you want to be successful, if you want to be happy. And I think that has always stuck with me very, very long. And I think, again, that's true in many, many ways, business as well as private. And it doesn't come easy, correct? It's often hard work.
Yes. Love it. Great words to live by. You must set yourself on fire. No one's waiting to help you out, right? Success is a choice. Happiness is a choice. Brilliant. Is there anything else that you'd like to kind of leave our listeners with today?
Yes, please make your room bookings at the Mandarin Oriental Singapore once we reopen on the 8th of September. No, I'm just joking. But really, really exciting. And I think anybody who is within the area, please, come and visit us, have a look,
I hope they do.
See the team. We're really, really, really excited about it. And thank you for having me again.
Awesome, mate. Yeah. No,
and hopefully,
my pleasure.
We gave some people some good inspirations who will listen.
I hope so too, man. No doubt we did. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's trying to inspire, inform, entertain, and hopefully impart some valuable advice along the way. So, Philipp, thank you so much, mate.
Thank you, mate.
Had a great time. Thank you.
Likewise.